Please can you remind me if you'll be so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks, Lori La Bey. And the reason I started this company was my mom had dementia for 30 years, and it really was life-changing for me. And I really felt a calling to do something different. And so Alzheimer Speaks, I'll just explain a little bit to you about it, because I always get new listeners asking, what the heck do we do and why do we do it? Bottom line, we are an advocacy-based company and a media outlet providing multiple platforms to help shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort around the world. And we truly believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations about life with dementia, that we're going to be able to help people continue to live purpose-filled lives, both those diagnosed and those caring for them. And so it's really an honor for me to be able to talk with people all around the world, hearing what they're doing to make a difference. Alzheimer Speaks also believes that, at our core, we have to work together in collaboration if we're going to win this battle against Alzheimer's and all the other types of dementia. And I can honestly say that I know that collaboration within our fan base is working. You see all of your likes, your clicks, your shares with spreading our content. If it's the radio show, if it's the Dementia Chats webinars that we do where our experts actually are diagnosed with dementia, if it's our blog, our YouTube channel, our Twitter, all those various platforms that you share got us recognized by ShareCare and Dr. Oz as the #1 influencer online, and also by Maria Shriver as an architect of change. So I hope that you will continue to do that, not because, I like the accolades. I mean, everybody does, but I really feel that those accolades are shared with each and every one of you, because we did not do that alone. And it really shows that team effort in terms of spreading awareness. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of that and helping get information to people who are in need. I also want you to think about, maybe you could be our next guest, because on Alzheimer Speaks, we like to raise everyone's voice. So that means someone who's diagnosed, or maybe someone who is starting to question, should they go in for a diagnosis and see what's going on. Maybe it's a care partner. Maybe it is someone who has written a book, a song, a movie, short videos, done some advocacy. Maybe you're a business that provides a service, a product, or a tool that can help those in this space. Again, we like to raise everyone's voice and really approach this in a collaborative fashion. Before I introduce our guest today, who is Katy Bowman, who I'm so excited to have on the show, I do want to just do a couple of housekeeping things. We are doing a dementia-friendly symposium and cruise November 11th through the 18th. And we still have a couple of cabins available. If you'd like to join us, please go to alzheimerspeaks.com and you'll be able to see that information right there. You will need to go through Kathy Schoaf, who is our travel agent, to be part of the symposium and cruise. So just to let you know that. But we have 4 people with dementia who will be speaking, along with myself, music therapist Becky Watson, and a gal in Colorado who is doing a dementia-friendly community there, Cindy Lazinski. So it's going to be a really fun time. We also have some wonderful giveaways. John Hopkins is donating some books, The 36-Hour Day, Bey, A Loving Approach to Dementia Care. The American Senior Magazine is donating some new magazines there. Plus, we have so many other fun giveaways that I think you'll really enjoy. So let's get this show on the road today. I was lucky enough to meet Katy Bowman out in California this summer for an event that Maria Shriver puts on called Move for the Minds. It was in Orange County. And I have to tell you, I was so impressed with Katy's work and her outlook that I immediately asked her to be on the show because I think her insights are going to be life-changing for so many people. You see, Katy is what she calls part biomechanics, part science communicator, and she considers herself a full-time mover. She has educated hundreds of thousands of people on the role of nutritious movement, which we're going to learn more about, and how that plays out in the body and in the world at large. So welcome, Katy. How are you today?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, like I said, I'm really excited to have you be here. One question I always ask my guests before we kind of get into the specifics of them being on the show is just to have them share if they have been personally touched by friends or family with dementia at all.
I have. My stepmother had Alzheimer's for 12 years.
Okay.
And so I have lived it. And my father, who recently passed away at 90, was a primary caretaker. So having the opportunity to support care, but also to support a caretaker and to see, to live it, I think it's been pretty direct. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That's about as hands-on as you can get there. Now, Katy, you have written this book, which is really interesting, called Dynamic Aging, and you have simple exercises for what you call whole body mobility. And, one of the things that I absolutely adored when I was listening to you at the Move for Minds was how you have broken down movement to really work into everyday life. Because many of us, and I think there's a lot of people like me, think of exercise as a chore, something extra that we have to kind of work into our schedule and not fun. And that's just kind of how I grew up. And I know a lot of people look at it in a whole different light, but I think there's a lot of people like me out there. And so I want you to talk about, first of all, defining about what you mean by nutritious movement and how that's different from exercise.
Well, movement is any time you're changing the shape of your body. As your joints are bending into different shapes, as you're bending over, or taking a light walk, or even if you're sitting in your chair and you decide to cross your legs one way versus the other way. Each thing that you do moves you in a particular way. And I like to delineate between that and exercise, because exercise is really, by clinical definition, something that you do that's repetitious in nature. It's often vigorous. It has a set time frame that you've predetermined you're going to do it. You're going to do it for 20 minutes or 40 minutes, or a set other type of parameters, like you're going to do it for 3 miles, or you're going to do it 20 times. Very, very rigid. Mm-hmm. And then oftentimes, in the way that you are thinking about it is the way that most people think about it. You need to leave your life to go to a special place to do it. You need a special outfit to do it. You probably need a shower when you're done doing it. And because movement, which is simply just changing your position, mm-hmm. Because we keep thinking about it as exercise, especially for this particular audience, if you don't have the luxury of being able to step away for a large period of time, then you don't really believe that there are any movement opportunities available to you, because how can we step away from our responsibilities so frequently when there are other people that need us? And so we end up with a lot of people who aren't doing the thing that's actually necessary, the thing that's actually nutritious to our body, meaning it feeds our cells. It is affecting our health of various systems, not only your muscles and your bones, but your nerves, and we can talk about later the function of your brain and your vision and all these other things that are kind of not necessarily movement related. That the nutritious quality of movements they don't have to be done in an exercise format. They just have to be movement. They can be done dispersed throughout your day in a way that doesn't require a shower afterwards, in a way that allows you to do it in your home and with your loved ones. So that's why I think it's really important that we reframe, as people recognize more so now than ever that movement is a key to their health, just like, eating a particular way and having community and support and stress-free living and maybe even joyful living as part of what makes us tick pretty well. Mm-hmm. Movement is also one of those things, but it doesn't have to be that classic description of exercise that frankly so many people kind of hate.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's, I think especially if you have any type of chronic illness, or if you're caring for somebody else, you're kind of pushed to the max usually, mentally, physically, time wise, and when we talk about exercise, is just one more thing that needs to get done. And as important as we know it is, it's usually one of the last things people will put on their schedule because, so many other things will take precedent because it is accessible. Like if it's doing wash or getting groceries or medications or, all those other things that need to get done in a day. And I loved how, when you were talking about just even how you set up your house, putting stuff on different shelves so you'd have to reach, and you'd have to stretch. And I know that there's a point, especially with, as bodies age, that could come into a safety issue for some people as well. So being smart in terms of that. But, when you were talking about that, maybe you can give some better examples than what I just did. But it really, the light bulb just went off in my head about, gosh, I really don't have to necessarily leave my house and belong to a club. There are things that I could do every day to keep my body in motion. And for me, I know I sit way too much, because I'm in front of the computer all the time and I can feel it. And I really need to do something different and change that mindset. Can you give our audience some other examples and maybe also talk about how to change that mindset? Because I think anyways, for me, it's pretty darn ingrained in my head, that it's exercise, not movement. And how do I make that shift?
Certainly. I was just thinking of an example you just gave about, like, what are the essentials? If we could kind of come to the caretaking essentials, so it's relevant to, to all of us, whoever we're taking care of. You've got food-related movements, food preparation, household chores, laundry. It would be to look at those events. So one of the things that I talk about in Dynamic Aging, which is the book that you were reading, is this idea that whether we recognize it or not, we've kind of changed our households to be convenient. We've designed our households, the height of the cupboards, the height of the counters, to require less movement of us. Mm-hmm. And so, your desk, everything keeps it so that your arms don't have to stretch very far and your knees and hips don't have to get you very far up and down to be able to facilitate this computer time that you're going to do. Where I will suggest something like, you have to do laundry anyway. You've prioritized laundry as an essential more so than movement. And if you were going to do, let's say that you also knew maybe your knees or your back was pretty stiff and you had already seen a specialist who said, there are some stretches that you could be doing for your back that would reduce your overall stress level. And that's kind of equally important for a caretaker. And it's also an essential, but it doesn't pile up as much as laundry does in your face. Mm-hmm. Would be this idea that why don't you sit on the floor then and put your legs out into this stretch that maybe, you know, a physiotherapist, or if you're trying to get to a stretching class or your yoga class would have you do to stretch your hips and relax your low back, why don't you just sit like that while you fold your laundry, taking care of two things at once, not only the essential laundry, but also the essential movement of your hips and your spine. So that's always threaded through my recommendations, are things like to look at what the essentials are. So you talked about some of the things I did in the kitchen would be putting my plates maybe two cupboards higher than I normally would. Cupboards is not the right word. Shelf. So instead of always using my shoulder in exactly the same way, maybe I'm lifting it 1 or 2 inches above, or putting the thing that I reach for once a day, whether it's tea bags or peanut butter, putting that into a place that requires just a little extra use of my shoulders, you know, and it's all in a very safe way, or putting things down a little bit lower than I normally use them to, and I'll help other people set up their kitchens like this as well, so that when they go do the simple thing of making a sandwich, making sure that their lunch is needed, they ended up moving more of their parts by doing so, effectively got more movement. And then just thinking of you right now having to do a lot of computer work, and I assume a lot of people at least have some computer time, changing up the space in which you're working, maybe if you have a laptop, if you're able to stand up, move it to a standing counter, and at least doing 10 or 15 minutes of your work on something that's standing, or having a crate where maybe you can set up your keyboard so that you're not consuming your computer time in exactly the same position over and over again. So it's really just playing with the environment in which you're doing the essentials. That's effective enough to get you moving more.
Which makes a lot of sense. And even like when I would do my radio shows, I used to do it standing up, and now I'm doing it sitting, and it's like I need to rearrange my office to do that again. Because I sit way too much. And what I found myself doing is I switch from one chair to another, you know, and it's just like, no, I can feel it in my back. I can feel even the loss of muscle, that I'm plugging into this computer way too much. And I have to change things up. Definitely have to. And one of the things that I like with your book is you have so many pictures in so many different stretches and movements, you know, to be able to help people. It's amazing. You know, you've got a chapter on reaching, carrying, lifting, and other functional movements. And I just don't think that we think about all the movement that we do and how it impacts how, you know, when we move one body part, there's kind of that little trickle effect. And that can make a big difference in keeping us loose. And I would think that they strengthen the core then, and would help, you know, if we're moving more, we're probably going to have less falls. Is that what you found in terms of balance and things?
I do, you know, and I really like to break that down, though. There's a point, because we move so little, our risk of weakness and loss of balance increases, so that when we do go to move, we're kind of a little bit more susceptible for the falls. And so what's happened, again, what I'm trying to highlight in especially that particular book compared to some of my other ones is, we know we need to move more, but how do you transition from being kind of a current non-mover, you know, someone who spends the bulk of their time in a chair? How do you safely transition so that if you put up something high, you know, you're not going to strain your shoulder by reaching too far? And so I do believe in transition because there's a direct relationship between the amount you move, the types of movement that you do, and the ability for your body to move safely. And so there's like this fine line that I like to help people negotiate and learn is like, okay, we want to work on your balance, but instead of, you know, standing up and doing a bunch of balance exercises, we're going to make standing up the exercise. You're just going to get out of your chair. I mean, even if you're listening to this right now seated, you could just stand up on 2 feet And that could be the exercise. You don't have to do anything more than just get out of your chair. If you're on a phone call, you can take it standing up.
Mm-hmm.
If you are waiting in line, instead of leaning, where you're leaning against the counter, where maybe you're at the bank and your whole body is propped up on the counter, you could just adjust your alignment or your posture a little bit so that you were holding your weight and not giving it to the counter. And then that would make that moment in time develop your body so that you were more stable and could hold up yourself longer. So it's just adjusting your thinking to seeing every moment as an opportunity for movement to
Mm-hmm.
some degree, and to recognize that by taking those movement moments, you are investing into a more stable, less prone to injury structure going forward. So all of those movements they're sort of an immediate investment.
Mm-hmm. And you have things, I think, that most of us don't think of as movement, like toe stretching. I mean, that would not come to mind, that would be an important thing for us to do. Can you explain why something like toe stretching is important for us?
Well, I don't think a lot of people, so 1 in 4 women, and I'm not sure what the statistics are for men. I know it's a prevalent issue for men, but I don't know the exact numbers, has foot pain to the point that they can't move their entire body, meaning whether they have plantar fasciitis or a neuroma, they have some sort of foot issue. The rest of their body is fine. But if you have this sore foot, you can't take a walk. You really can't do more than just sit. And so I've written a couple books just on foot pain alone, because foot pain can make your entire body immobile, and it often relates specifically to the immobility of your feet. So even for people who are exercising on a regular basis, maybe they're taking a walk every day, maybe they're taking a yoga class every day, when they come to work with me, we will find that despite maybe that some of their body is active, that their feet, which are very complex parts of your anatomy,
Mm-hmm.
25% of the number of muscles and bones in your body are from the ankle down. That most
Wow.
people they've never exercised their feet. They've kind of slipped their feet into very stiff shoes and head off to take a walk. And so they can be regular walkers, but they're like, as I'm getting older, I'm losing balance, my knees, I maybe have osteoarthritis in my knees, and I can't figure out why, because I exercise regularly. And I'll have them take their foot out of their shoe and say, the base of support of your body is really kind of all hinging on this really complex structure that hasn't been equally trained as the other parts of you. And so yes, toe stretching, and if everyone wanted to try something right now, they could take off their shoes and see if they could spread their toes so that none of them were touching, to spread them out, just like if you took your hand and spread the fingers away from each other so that there was space in between each one, that there are muscles in your feet that do this for your toes, but maybe you've never used them. And as you strengthen your feet, the payoff for that, besides healthier feet, is a stronger base of support, meaning, again, you're going to, when you do start moving more, getting out of your chair more, maybe deciding to take a walk every day or parking a little bit farther from the grocery store so that you have more time to walk and maybe more time to carry your groceries if you don't always wheel them out, that you'll find that those activities are supported by healthier, stronger feet.
Mm-hmm. Which makes total sense. And for me, I was just like I said, and I am listening to you now, just amazed at, I guess, how I have taken my body parts for granted, basically, and not realized the importance and how intricate they are, and how much they can really help me if I appreciate that they exist. And I don't think I've really appreciated their existence, in terms of the mechanics of my moves and, strengthening my core and keeping me safe. and comfortable, and not, pain-free. All of those types of things I think people struggle with. And yet we don't talk about simple things. I mean, you've got a lot of movements that people can do sitting or lying down. They don't need all this extra equipment that's in the gym to be able to feel the benefits of strengthening their body. And I think, we've almost been, the advertised myth that we have to belong to a club to be healthy and fit. We've bought into that. And in your book kind of breaks that down and says, you can do this on your own in your home. And for someone who is a care partner or someone who is dealing with some forms of dementia, you've really broken things down that are very simple to be able to do. So they're not complicated. I mean, I remember going to the gym, and every machine I would have to readjust and know exactly how to utilize it correctly. Where when you take that equipment away, it's kind of you and your environment and the movement itself. And I think you take the scary out of movement. And maybe there is, maybe I'm simplifying it too much. Maybe there is a total right or wrong way, but I get the feeling when I read your book that even if I don't do it right, I'm still moving in a different fashion than what I was, so that's probably a good thing. And you're not calling for kind of the reps and things that you get in the gym, where that's where I know I've hurt my body by pushing too hard, too fast. And please tell me if I'm interpreting the book incorrectly. Don't because I want to make sure our audience understands what it is that what you've put together here for people.
No, I thank you, because taking the fear out of movement, I think there is a lot of fear around movement because the spaces that we go to for movement aren't always designed with everyone in mind at every stage, at every need. They're trying to meet a few really specific needs in the best way that they can. But having worked with thousands of people, face to face, has been a very good laboratory for me to go, every single person has a different need from their movement experience, and everything seems very complicated and heavy things and metal things and noisy things and not always a pleasing aesthetic experience or auditory. Maybe it's loud and blaring. And so, dynamic aging, I wrote specifically. I write a lot of books trying to take the scary out of movement for lots of different populations of people. But dynamic aging was written specifically for a group of people that equally need movement, as we all do. We're all aging. We all need movement all of the time. But to give it in really simple steps, and all my books have simple steps because I believe that movement is just kind of a very simple, we have all have this a very kind of basic capacity for movement. We just need to be reminded that every morning you put on your shoes, that was a body part that you put in there. And maybe before you put it in or after you take it out, it could use a little bending or rotating or massage. That is movement. Those articulations are bringers of health, and that movement can be done within your own landscape fairly easily, that you don't have to have lots of money to be able to do it. You don't have to have lots of free time to be able to do it. And you don't even need to know a lot about movement science to be able to do it. And so I try to liken my approach. This is why I call it nutritious movement, by the way. is I think that the best analogy for what I'm trying to say is the story about movement that we've been kind of sold is that, yes, you need exercise. You need to go to a gym because you need these particular moves of your shoulder and this muscle and that muscle. And it's very similar to saying you need vitamins and minerals. Right now, the easiest way to get vitamin and minerals is to go to the store and buy them in their individual containers. You know, you buy a bottle of vitamin C and a bottle of vitamin D and a bottle of whatever minerals you're going to supplement with.
Mm-hmm.
But that you could eat a more nutritious diet. You could change the foods that you were eating, and those vitamins would be contained within it. So it's only because we don't move regularly through our lives that we need to supplement with exercises. But if you add more movement nutrition just in doing your everyday tasks, you don't need to take separate movement nutrients in the form of exercise. You're already, it's like you're just eating well, you're moving well. You shouldn't have to supplement that with additional pill forms because you've chosen kind of how you're taking in your nutrition throughout the day. So it's really just having people move nutritiously throughout the day so that at the end of the day, they don't need to head to a place to get, vitamin chest exercises and vitamin abdominal exercises and vitamin low back stretches. That folding the laundry contained vitamin stretch your back.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That vitamin twisting and core strength could be you just unloading the dishwasher. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of having everything be so close to the dishwasher, you having to take a few extra steps and reaches in the process of putting it away. So it's a way of putting the movements back into our lives so that you don't have it as this extra need after you've done all the other things on your list that are also essential.
Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of laugh and giggle when I think of, I grew up in the 70s and, I think of the rotary phones. I think of, we actually had to get off the couch to change the channel on the TV. It was just so different. When we were younger, we played outside. We were much more active. We've gotten so complacent now. Everything is kind of almost as virtual reality in terms of game playing, as far as conversations. It's very interesting how much it's affected our lifestyles. Everything is about convenience and squeezing more in. So, when we park our car, most of us look for the closest spot instead of just saying, hey, this is an opportunity to take a little walk, and get a little bit more exercise.
Well, and to that point, you grew up in the 70s, and you can recognize that now, having lived through, seen all these conveniences come on. What we don't see are all the conveniences that came on before us.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, what I'm paying attention, what I'm very interested in, how sedentarism is becoming more and more. It's like a goal of our culture in general. So backup cameras, for example, like you had to turn and look over your shoulder, right? Like that was the last kind of twist that happened naturally, but now there's a backup camera. So we're always looking for the payoff, the safety, the thing that makes it good, but with those things is often packaged less movement for you to do physically. So for someone who grew up in the 20s or 30s, even having a car, like that's a radical technology, but that meant less walking, and it meant less walkable spaces because we had to put roads for those cars. And so since the Industrial Revolution, there's been a slow outsourcing or eradication of movements. And then you can go back before that to, which is the work that I do often, which is in the 1,000 years before that, what movements did they used to be there? And you can keep going back and you can see one thing definitely throughout society, as society has, progressed in many ways, that progression is lockstep, ironically, with a loss of our need for movement as we dwell inside of it. So I'm always interested in the health effects that brings every time we basically lose large swaths of movement. What are the physical realities for that particular culture at that time? Because there are health correlations to people as they become more and more and more sedentary. And I don't mean that they exercise less. I mean that their life requires less movement to facilitate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that phenomenon between the 70s and the 2000s. You can just see that over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I think of all the walking and the riding of the bikes and, even the grocery store. Now you can have your groceries delivered, so you don't even have to go up and down the aisle and pick them up, or lift them in and out of the cart or bag them. And I mean, it really is interesting when you look at that. And like you said, the backup little videos, in the car, just that turning of the head, which is critical for people from a safety standpoint, because you need to know what's going on. I mean, you have to drive defensive and it's very easy little things that can really cause a lot of damage or harm in the long run. And they're so subtle, we just don't pick them up because it seems like it's a convenience.
Right.
Because that's what we've been told. And it is a convenience, but at what cost?
Well, convenience, I ask that convenience, I think we usually see as saving time, but I tend to frame convenience as saving movement, because you haven't really saved time, because at the end of the day, maybe your car didn't require that you twist your shoulders or your waist or your head, but your body requires that you twist those parts to maintain them. So at the end of the day, you're just left with a huge list of exercises that you have to do to get those, to keep those tissues healthy. And so they are just like those individual movements are just as essential as all the other tasks that seem more essential. However, the effects of not doing them compound over time and silently, and then they just come on, and then they seem like separate entities that don't necessarily relate to, 100,000 steps not taken,
mm-hmm.
or 7,500 twists not turned. It's really hard to correlate what you didn't do to the thing that's ailing you right now, because we're so used to correlating it to something that we did do
mm-hmm.
versus not.
Very true. Very true. The other thing that I like about your book, Dynamic Aging, is so much of what you're talking about, again, is everyday stuff that we can incorporate and we can do together. We don't have to do alone. So if you are caring for somebody with dementia, it is stuff that you can, share and do together. In the comfort of your own home, or you can each do it separately if you want as well, because it really is about becoming conscious about your movement or lack of. And I think that whole consciousness is the big shift. Anyways, for me it is, because I bought into the other end, and it's just like, oh my gosh, how did I miss this? How did I miss this? Because it really is common sense. I mean, when you think about it, we all say, if you don't use it, you lose it. And it's like, okay, duh. So why am I doing this to myself? I mean, it really makes us ask the question.
Well, exactly. And why are we doing this? But also, after you thought about it, like, okay, what little tweaks can I make to get back to the self-care,
mm-hmm.
to the basic self-care? And then doing it, like you said, with ones that you may be caring for, also very doable. I tried to really bring in the theme of community and moving together in dynamic aging, because that is very key, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you give us some easy ways to get somebody with dementia moving and their care partners?
I find gardening to be one gardening, and so it all depends on, everyone's physical capabilities, but gardening is a wonderful way to get more movement, and there are definitely some guidelines around gardening that caretakers can consider, especially if not everyone can advocate or communicate, how they're feeling. But if you don't have a garden, a community garden is a great space to come to and even walk around. They often have borders around them, which make them nice spaces that allow for a little movement freedom without concern, about wandering.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of situation is great, as is dog walking. Like involving dog walking and gardening were two of the movements that actually were found to be very positive for even people with a diagnosis of various types of dementia, because they're low intensity movements, and they just kind of have natural stimulants, letting the dog lead or following the dog. They had more context. And then gardening, of course, is the bending and the twisting and the squatting and maybe even carrying little things from here to there. I live in a retirement community, so we have community gardens with raised beds
Mm-hmm.
that make movements, that much more functional and safe and make us capable of the movements. If you feel like doing outside gardening puts anyone at risk for, extreme temperatures, then creating a little indoor gardening space with containers, then they still can facilitate that same moving from point A to point B. It's something to do, but it's something to do that's very natural. There's a lot of benefit to green spaces too for all of us we're all getting older. Green spaces are beneficial now, it turns out, to humans, no matter what your age is. But
Mm-hmm.
it gets you touching plants. It's tactile. It's living. It's healthy, just kind of all around it. And then you can, dig in the soil. You can often dig and plant. So it's a lot of movement for something that's not an exercise, so to speak. But if you
Mm-hmm.
wanted to carve out exercise time, then exercise videos can often be fun to put on and just play in an area, where you can choose to follow along or not, or maybe just get up and down off the floor a couple times. So those are often easy ways to get more movement while still caretaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to have someone with you.
Well, and I like, the walking and, if you're taking the dogs out, or maybe it's just a couple and you're just going to hold hands and walk, and just have that intimate time together. Because sometimes we don't touch as much as we age too, and getting back to the core of the relationship versus taking care of somebody, just allowing to be with somebody. I think can be a huge gift. I was also thinking about dancing. A lot of people love to dance, and you can dance slow dance, or you can do a little faster dance depending on your situation. You can dance in a chair or a wheelchair. I remember with my mom, we used to stand up and dance, and then she got to the point where she was in a wheelchair, and we danced with her in her wheelchair, and then we would kind of do an arm dance. Then we got down to a finger dance, but it was still movement, and it was the incorporation of the music and the touch. And we always had a lot of fun, with it, no matter what we were doing. Yet it was still movement. Or I'm thinking of, cooking together, or like you said, doing laundry or vacuuming. It doesn't have to just be the want. You can move your body a little bit different as you're pushing that vacuum or sweeping the floor, or dusting. It doesn't have to be so black and white and tight and proper, and have a little fun, with things.
Oh, I find chores, I work with very little children because that's who's in my home, but the idea is still the same. I'm caretaking full time, especially when you have someone smaller. And so I use chores, that chore time, to get all sorts of movement and play into my life. And so to create this big game of sorting, like I'm just thinking of a ton of laundry. Laundry can be a game. And first of all, you can get on the floor to do it. So now everyone's on the floor, which you use your knees and hips to get down there. Maybe you set up 3 baskets, and it's just like, okay, all socks have to be thrown into that basket where you're reaching and throwing, and it's just a fun game. And you're going to take longer to do your laundry, but instead of doing your laundry and then coming up with a game and then doing exercise, which would each be 30 minutes, now you just spend 90 minutes playfully doing your laundry, and it's a moment. Mm-hmm. None of those are things that have to be checked out. All 3 of them can be things that you can relish in doing with your loved ones. Mm-hmm. And you're also self-loving at the same time because you're taking care of yourself as you do it.
Oh, I like that saying, kind of making moments. Because it just, to me, it changed. I'm always one that says, focus on the joy. You're only going to find what you seek out. And I think the same thing applies with this is, if you don't see movement as exercise or good for you, or if you don't see it as making moments, then you've missed that opportunity. And so, shifting that mindset in terms of what you're looking for shifts your outcomes. I mean, that's just the way it works. And so I think if we can shift our perceptions of what it is we're doing, then we can really shift the outcomes of what happens and how it occurs as well.
I remember you saying that when we were on the panel about making moments. So this is just, for people who have seen exercise as a chore or something that, that didn't pertain to them, many people are struggling with even kind of recognizing, their own body parts, all the individual parts and pieces that each need their own bit of love and movement. It's just incorporating that idea to see all the ways that you can take joy in movement. Mm-hmm. How to reframe something that you feel obligated to do, to recognize that these are all joyful opportunities, that for our experience here, and so that you can learn to view them as joyful and beneficial and helpful and fun.
Yeah. Well, and I would think, depending on how we frame those things, if we look at them as frustrating and a must do and don't really want to be here versus I'm going to enjoy this is going to be fun to be able to do, I would think that that's going to change our chemistry in our body as well, in terms of how we perceive that and how we project that, in addition to getting the benefits of the movement for, let's say, the specific joints. But I would think that there's probably a chemical reaction within our body too, in terms of how we're perceiving that.
Certainly. And that's when you perceive it as something you want to be doing, it miraculously, your life becomes more full of it. Mm-hmm. And when you resist it or don't enjoy it, you find yourself maybe not getting to it as much as possible. So definitely choosing to perceive movement as something that you could enjoy and can enhance a relationship or a period of time is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Katy, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. I highly recommend your book, Dynamic Aging. Again, simple exercises for whole body mobility, and it's just excellent. I think it'll change people's perceptions and attitudes towards exercise and really get them thinking about, how can they just incorporate this in everything they do? Because we're all moving constantly. We don't always look at ourselves as exercising, but there's no way that we can't move, unless we're totally paralyzed or something. Our bodies are moving. And that's what they're built to do. So people, you can go to nutritiousmovement.com to learn more about Katy Bowman. You can also follow her on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. Any last tips that you'd like to give people, Katy?
Oh, I think if I could leave you with one thing, it would be for the next 24 hours, every time you walk through a doorway, see if you can reach up and touch the top, or if you're a little shorter, the side of it, just to get your arms moving a little bit different way. Tune in to letting the environment call forth some movement, and just keep moving and be happy.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the efforts you're doing in trying to make our lives simpler, more comfortable, and more fun. So keep up the great work, Katy. I do want to mention all of our shows here on Alzheimer's Speaks Radio are archived, and so you can access these anytime. You can share these, and please do. That's why we're here. We have over 400 shows you can go back and listen to. I'd also encourage you to check on a platform we have called Dementia Chats, where I interview people with dementia. Those are all free videos. They average about an hour in length. And our experts living with dementia just have brilliant insights. Our last one we did was just on the impact of humor and laughter when living with dementia. I also want to just give a shout out to Atria. I'm going to be out east and visiting them in Massachusetts and Connecticut, October 24th through the 26th. And we're going to be doing some screenings of His Neighbor Phil. And I'll also be doing some educational programs called Driving Change in Dementia Care, and would love to have you be part of that. If you want more information, you can reach out to me, or you can get a hold of Atria, and that's ATRIA. And I would love to meet up with you. In the meantime, have a blessed week, everyone. Appreciate your time so much. Bye now.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebesti, your host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people can just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday, without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.